Explain the motive then for killing Robert F. Kennedy.
Well, the main motives were similar to JFK. He supported right of return. He supported going after the lobby. But I think the scariest thing is him investigating his brother's death,
Right.
which he had just started doing. He'd always said, I just trusted the Warren Commission. He was really damaged. His brother was murdered. And he knew. He kind of felt guilt, I think, because he had put Hoffa in jail. He did send Carlos Marcelo to Guatemala. He was going after the mob. He knew how dangerous they were. They'd messed with his father, with Joe Kennedy before that. Philadelphia ran him out. And so maybe he just didn't want to see it because he's kind of like, they killed him and I was hitting the beehive or whatever. But Garrison had this, Garrison's investigation was kind of meh. But they didn't know what he was going to come up with. But the fact that they bugged his office, like, why would you do that? Why do you need to know what he knows? Mm-hmm. What are you scared of? So Robert Kennedy had just spent about a week where, 3 hours locked in a room going through leads. We don't know what he knew, but I think he figured it out. And he won the California primary, largest state in the union then and still. So it looked like he was going to become president. And I think if he had lost that primary, he would have lived. But since he won, they took him out that night. He said, let's on to Chicago and let's win there. I mean, by midnight, 5 minutes after midnight, they shot him 3 times. And
talk about the evidence, because people say, this sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory. No, this is not conspiracy. Look,
if all you do is, like, Sirhan's there with a gun, he did it. Like, well, I can point to prior assassinations. They have 2 shooters, one's a diversion, one whatever. But the problem is, Robert Kennedy, first of all, Sirhan had a .22 caliber revolver that shot 8 times, but there's 13 shots. He did not have a second gun, and he didn't reload it. So there's too many holes. You've got 5 bystanders hit, and then you've got RFK hit 3 times in a hole and through his jacket. But then there's 2 holes on Sirhan's side of the room. He's not shooting backwards. And another hole near the floor, near a door jamb. And in 1976, through FOIA request, we have photographs of the holes, and we have photographs of photographs. It's a weird thing where they circled and numbered them. 7, 2, 3, something. And we have witnesses too. There was two people who were just there who saw the holes and also saw a bullet. Mm-hmm. But then there was an FBI agent who was there, who was not only like there, he was there when he was shot. And he saw both holes and both bullets. And the guy's name was Baxter, the head of the very prominent people, all witnessed this. And it's, it's photographed. It doesn't come out till 1976 is the problem. He shot in 1968. Mm-hmm. So they, unfortunately they didn't have it quite. But yeah, and then the coroner, Thomas Noguchi and a guy named Wolf, they both looked at the police examiner, determined, and this is very damning, not only do they have the wrong angles and ballistic evidence is way off, there are burn marks on the back of Robert Kennedy's head below his right ear, powder burns. So when you shoot a gun, if you watch it in super slow motion, it's a little bit of powder goes out and then a flame and then the bullet.
Yeah, muzzle flash.
Yeah, there's a fancy term for it, but I don't know what it is, but it's like the stelling or something like that. And the cannulars were off too. One of the bullets that they pulled out of a guy named Wiesel, who was in his stomach, had 2 lines, and the one pulled out of Kennedy only had 1. And usually when you buy a clip or, loading, even if you're loading a revolver, they're uniform.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it just shows that it was probably from two different guns, correct?
Yeah, it's two different, same caliber gun, but different
Right.
handlers on the bullets. The bullet in Kennedy's head, it almost goes, it's from behind, but almost sideways. Like someone just put the gun right up to his head and shot him. And Sirhan shooting from the front cannot hook a bullet around and hit him
In the back of the
like
head.
in the back of the head like that. He didn't turn around, and if he had turned around, so it's the right side of his head, then Sirhan would have to be to the right of him to get it like that if he turned all the way around. Plus, they did chemical tests on his suit, so there's a chemical burn mark. Someone had to be like an inch away to leave that in his coat.
And so, who
right, kind of through the shoulder pad and kind of like the upper neck, and then up below the right ear is where he's getting shot.
So who was the person that actually fired the
His name was Thane Eugene Caesar. Nobody called him that. They just called him Gene. But Gene Caesar is the one that did it. He worked for Ace Security. He is all tied up with John Alessio, who's a hardcore mobster that's tied to very wealthy capos, we call them, in the mob in California, and worked with Nixon cronies. And there's even a contract killing discussed between Galente and Hoffa in jail about killing him, and that got shopped around. And I remember William Bailey was the FBI agent's name, by the way, and Baxter Ward was the county supervisor, and they all witnessed the holes in the wall. And I have pictures of it and everything. So yeah, if you look at the physical evidence, you've got the powder burns, you've got the chemical tests, you've got the ballistic tests, then you also have audio recordings of 13 shots. And that was by Philip Von Prague and Robert Joling did audio. And then there was another one done more recently from Wes Dooley and Paul Pegas of Audio Engineering in Pasadena. They actually were saying at least 13 shots. And what happens is all the screaming and stuff from the crowd gets to where you can't know if there's any more. Mm-hmm. But there's 13 bullets. Now, there could be a bullet you didn't find or someone picked it up or whatever. So, but all you need is more than 8. And it's impossible. If you have more than 8, then it cannot only be Sirhan. And one of the most reliable journalists that ever lived, John Pilger,
right,
was there in the pantry on Sirhan's side of the room. Okay, he's in front of Kennedy, and the man next to him was grazed by a bullet on the arm. And Pilger, I believe him. I mean, that's John Pilger, very super reliable journalist. Also, a guy who worked for CBS News. His name was Don Schulman. So this is a news person who's, has an eye to look for these kind of things. He saw Caesar pull his gun out and fire it. But what he said is Kennedy's bodyguard fired back.
Yeah.
Which is a reasonable assumption. He's a police officer. So he thought, he's shooting at the bad guy. But by most accounts, Sirhan had been tackled after like the third shot. The maitre d', they pushed him over this, in those silver tables, with the food.
Right.
And then on the ground afterward. He's a little guy, and they dogpiled him. But as he fell, you hear pop, 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 and Kennedy falls. And when Kennedy falls, that's when all the women screaming and da-da-da. And there was a woman named Nina Rose Hughes. There's some pictures of her with Robert. And she's just going on memory, like, I heard ta, 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 ta. She's counting the shots. And she told them 12 to 14 shots. They changed her statement to 8 shots, which is really stupid. But this is showing complicity of the LAPD, because you could just say, well, she said she heard 12 to 14, but she could just remember it wrong. You know, you can't just kind of hear audio. She's like, no, it was like fireworks. So it wasn't like bang, bang, bang. There was 2 incidences also where 2 shots were like ta-ta, where it had to be 2 guns, according to the gun nuts that know about this stuff.
Right.
And so that was Thane and Sirhan shooting like that. So his gun was going. Thane walked into that room holding Robert's right elbow, and he was right behind him like a human shield, because he knows that Sirhan's about to pop out. He didn't want to get shot.
Yeah.
And Sirhan just firing at whatever. He's hitting bystanders mostly. While everyone's looking at him doing that, Thane kills him. And Robert actually ripped the tie off of him. They have clip-on ties because police don't have ties because that you could choke them. But what's next to his hand while he's on the floor, it was like his final signal, like, hey, the cop shot me.
Yeah, the corruption of the police in both of the Kennedy murders.
Oh yeah.
You know, if the angle that looks like John F. Kennedy was shot on the final fatal headshot, it came from the direction of the Texas jail, which would be 20 degrees off from where.
And Bill Decker, who's the chief of police, who was a frequent, often at the Carousel Club run by Jack Ruby, seeing the hookers, let's just admit it.
Yeah.
And Patrick Dean, who's another, not only to Ruby, but several mob connections, who failed a polygraph test, by the way. He's the one that lied. Like, how did Oswald know? I mean, excuse me, how did Ruby know when Oswald was being transferred and where? Like, to the second, and so he could go up and shoot him in the stomach. Well, those are your 2 most likely cohorts in the police that would have tipped him off. And it was Dean that was in charge of transferring him. So that's what happened there.
Yeah. And then in the case of Los Angeles, ties into people like Mickey Cohen.
Mickey Cohen ran a gambling operation out of that hotel. He knew William Gardner well. William Gardner ran like just the regular hotel security, but none of his guys had guns. They were just in the brown uniforms and pushing people or whatever, but they didn't have guns. That's why they had a security. We're going to have this little private organization, Alessio's guys, and bring them in. So they walked them into a kill zone, but they insisted on, this Patsy's got to be Palestinian for some reason.
Yeah.
And so you look at the conglomerate that Alessio is running, because he ends up being the top shareholder for this thing called Westgate, California, which was, if you know what a zaibatsu is, what the Japanese mafia uses, Yakuza, that was similar to what they were doing in California with a bank and several businesses, giving no interest loans to themselves and loan sharking, But Holt Smith and Alessio were running Westgate, California, and they're the ones that hire a security and everything. So the conglomerate that has money from Cohen, as you said, from Modalitz, who's helping procure Bugsy Siegel's old properties, with Hank Greenspun, who, if anyone's seen New Mech, you all know what Greenspun did in his gun running with Nathan Lift and getting conventional guns to Haganah, the Israeli terrorists that take over Palestine. And so, they're all in there now. Cohen was in jail when RFK was killed, but he definitely had relationships, and it was just filled in with the next mobster with the Ambassador Hotel. They ran gambling operations out of there, and he ended up getting recommendation. He's also tied to Russ Parsons and Sirhan's lawyers, like Grant Cooper. So as was Alessio. So, yeah. Yeah,
this
Parson wrote a glowing recommendation for Cohen to Cleveland authorities. People don't know, Mickey Cohen was he all over the place, but out of Ohio too.